What Mountain? Chapter 5. Mike stared at the glowing blue-skinned waiter dumbstruck and said in barely a whisper, "Applications?" "Yes. Good job once again," it said with a bright wide smile showing its clean, sparkling white teeth. "Now, let's get down to business, shall we?" Okay," said Rebecca. "Most excellent. Welcome to the first of 7 towers, and once again, congratulations on making the journey here. But it doesn't end here. In fact, it has just started. Remember, you have to make it to at least the 2nd tower before you decide if you want to go home or not. Oh, and a friendly tip. From this point on, it's going to take a little bit more than just belief to get you through the trials." "But the mountain will help us like it did before, right?" Mike blurted out, feeling his heart race. To be honest, he had forgotten about needing to reach the 2nd tower, but now he remembered hearing Jesse mention something of the sort. "Oh, the mountain will give you everything you need, but the actual task is up to you, and from this point on you might be facing other applicants, meaning the mountain is helping them as much as it is helping you. No more handicap setting if you get my meaning." "You're talking about the monsters?" Rebecca said. "Oh yes, the monsters," it smiled again. "Though to be truthful, we didn't take it quite as easy on those two," it said, pointing at Emma and Ulse. "Oh, and I do apologize about the dragon. Most people who turn into monsters lose their minds, making suggestions much more impactful. But dragons, well, they keep their minds mostly intact, and they had decided that they were going to eat you no matter what the mountain said." "Okay, enough," Rebecca said. "I have questions." "Ask them," it said. "First, these two just lost their parents. Is there something you can do?" "Nothing I can do, no. But once they walk into the door behind me, they'll be able to find something to help them. I'm sure of that." "Trust me, you have no idea what's behind me," it said, smiling wider than ever. Rebecca frowned, clenching her fist, and screamed, "Is this some kind of sick game?" The creature only continued to smile back at her and said, "Get mad, yell, I don't mind. My job is the same. You're plucked from existence. Nobody around but you and me," it laughed. "Okay, buddy," Mike said, trying to sound intimidating. "Tell us what's going on." "Well, I can't tell you everything. Where would the fun in that be? But I will tell you, in this tower here, you'll find what your heart most desires. Is it love or is it power? Is it in things that make you smile or in possessions that make you feel higher? It is all in here, I tell you that, but beware because others can make you feel flat. It is now your choice. Come on through or turn around and become something like old stew." The creature spoke all of this while making continuous hand gestures, almost breaking into a dance in certain points. But after it was done, it pointed its fingers on either side of its wide smile and disappeared, leaving the 6 of them alone. "That last part sounded rehearsed," said Ulse with a sigh. "I just expected a little bit something more is all, and how about a thank you for going to go collect them?" "Ulse," said Emma, "I'm sure the mountain will reward us, but I could have done without the song at the end as well." "Well," Ulse said, turning to the others, "this is goodbye, I think." And with that said, Ulse and Emma, who didn't bother to turn around at all, strolled through the large wooden doors that reminded Mike of a castle barricade behind the now abandoned stone podium that the blue-skinned creature had been waiting on. Mike sighed as Ulse and Emma disappeared through the door. "You know," he said, "I too expected better of the mountain. It helped me with the snakes, told me the secret to reach this place, and then—" "Yeah," Rebecca said, putting the small girl down, who still clutched desperately to her. "I wasn't sure what to expect, so I guess I'm not all that disappointed," she spat angrily. "You know, this is an ancient power we are probably dealing with." "Well then, it's an ancient douchebag." Yeah," Mike agreed. "That's another consistent theme with this place." "Well, come on then, everyone. I'd rather deal with whatever's inside than be like old stew." "Too late, Mike," Rebecca whispered hotly, strolling past him with barely a glance walking through the doors. "What?" Mike tried to say, following her and the 2 children through the doors, but it died on his lips when he crossed the barrier. He found himself inside a massive multi-story entrance room that was colored brightly with red and gold flooring. In the center of the room there stood a statue of a woolly mammoth that was dressed in purple rugs etched in fine light blue designs and held what looked like a small house on its back. Or Mike thought it was a statue until he saw the trunk of the massive creature move to scratch itself. To either side of them were escalators that extended as far as Mike's eye could see, which led to levels upon levels of walkways that held massive, brightly colored stone fronts. It was like stepping inside the most massive mall in the world. Had to be the most massive mall in the world. Behind the mammoth and what must have been the center of the tower was a waterfall which was fed from somewhere above. His view was blocked by a giant gold glittering chandelier, which seemed magically suspended above the mammoth. Mike screamed but was barely heard due to the roar of the waterfall, which from even where they stood demanded attention. "I'm going to go check out the waterfall." Mike wasn't sure why, but the waterfall entranced him. He had to see it. Mike ran forward, hearing Rebecca and the children follow him past the mammoth, which gave them a curious stare as they ran past, towards the center of the tower and its glowing waterfall. Mike, which didn't really stop to think about it, ran past several groups of teenagers, all who gave them funny looks as he ran past. He stopped, looking at the wooden glossed rails which blocked his path. Just on the other side was the waterfall. He looked up and saw the sun and clear blue skies through a giant gaping hole which must have been at least half a mile high in the air. Mike didn't even realize it should have been the moon considering it was nighttime outside. He turned his gaze downward and saw a shining pool of clear bubbling water where the waterfall ended. He couldn't help it. He laughed gleefully. "Howard!" Rebecca said, slapping him. "Well, what?" he snapped. "Oh, my God," Rebecca said. "I'm so sorry. I thought you were my husband." Mike's heart stopped. In front of him was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She was young with smooth, silky tan skin and deep amber eyes. She was thin and toned with brunette hair and blonde highlights that gleamed in the bright light of the mall. Mike frowned. He was sure it had been Rebecca's voice he had heard. "It's okay," he found himself saying, so stunned by the beautiful young girl in front of him that he didn't even register that his voice had changed. "Well, I'll see you around, I guess," she said, turning around as if lost. She turned back quickly, though, frowning at him. "You by chance didn't see two young children around, did you?" Something clicked in Mike's mind then. "Rebecca?" Rebecca frowned and hesitantly said, "Mike?" Mike gasped, taking another look at her, then hesitated slightly before looking over himself. But the only thing he really noticed was that his clothes were falling off. It took a moment for him to realize it was because they were way too big for him. In fact, the large red shirt, which before had been one size too small, was now enough to cover his whole body. So either his clothes blew up in size or he shrank. Mike took a glance at the mammoth, the only reference for size that he knew he could remember, and sure enough, the mammoth had somehow grown taller, as if that was possible. Mike took another look at Rebecca, who had just realized herself that her clothes were now in a total state of disrepair. She too was now fumbling with her pants, trying to keep them on, and seeing that her shirt was only just long enough to cover her body, it too was, well, indecent for polite society, Mike couldn't help but to think. Then, as if to challenge this notion of polite society, a teen boy just walked between Rebecca and Mike, and he was naked. He hadn't even paid Rebecca or Mike the slightest thought, and as Mike turned to look at the boy, his gaze started to notice that everyone around was either naked or wore the most ridiculous outfits that Mike would have rather them been naked. For instance, one boy was walking around in what appeared to be a suit of armor made of pots and pans. It took a moment longer, but then Mike started to notice that everyone around was young and beautiful. It was as if he was in the middle of a model fitting room, if the fitting room had been the world's largest mall complete with a mammoth. "Well," Mike said, stunned at the fiber of youth in his voice, "I guess we're here." Rebecca laughed, which made her lose her grip on her pants, and they fell. Mike rushed forward to try and help, but then fell to the ground as he got tangled up in his own loose clothing, and before long he and Rebecca were rolling around on the ground, half naked and laughing. Mike stood, giving up on his pants and underwear. There was just no way they were going to fit, and was content on letting his now extra long shirt cover himself. Rebecca, who was already fit to begin with, managed to get her pants back on and secured them in place by poking extra holes in her belt. Then she rolled up the extra pant legs and kicked off her now useless shoes. There was no saving them. "There," she said. "That ought to do me." "Well, we lost the children, didn't we?" "Well, Howard, if you hadn't run off to get a closer view of that waterfall, we would all still be together." Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I just don't know what came over me. The moment I saw the water, I couldn't help myself. It was like it was calling me. I'm pretty sure that if you hadn't shown up, that I would have jumped in." Rebecca nodded and turned back around to see if she could spot the children. But all she could see were random naked teens, endless stores, the mammoth, and then she spotted, almost dumbfoundedly, an information booth. It was located right behind the mammoth, which was why she supposed she hadn't spotted it earlier. "Come on," she said, grabbing Mike by his shirt, pulling him along. "I know this isn't important right now," Mike said, following almost dreamlike. "But what do I look like now?" Rebecca didn't turn around, keeping her eyes focused on the information booth, afraid that if she looked away, it would vanish into thin air. "I'll find you a mirror later." Of course, she had been curious on her own looks, but she'd be damned if those kids got hurt. A moment later, they were both at the empty information booth. It was a little more than a black circular stand with the words "Information Center" in bold white lettering printed on the center of it. On top of the stand in front of them was a bell, the exact same as the ones you used to see in cheap roadside motels. Rebecca hesitated as she reached her hand out because she didn't recognize the hands as her own, but then she remembered she was different now, and rang the bell. The response was immediate. A muffled "hello" came from behind the stand, and a moment later, another blue-skinned male or female waiter-dressed figure appeared, rising in the middle of the information booth as if it had been asleep underneath it. The only difference as far as they could see was that this one had a pair of large rabbit ears fixed to his head rather than deer antlers. "How can I possibly help you?" it said, looking bored and uninterested, unlike its counterpart. Yes," Rebecca said. "We lost 2 children." It raised its eyebrows. "Are you the parents?" "Well, no." "Ah, yes. I suppose that makes sense then. If you were the parents, you wouldn't have lost them. Not in this place. But if you did lose 2 children that did not belong to you, then they would have simply found their own calling, now wouldn't they?" it said, taking out a nail file and starting to file its glowing blue nails. "Okay, look," Rebecca said, taking the file away from the creature and throwing it away. "You are going to tell me if they're fine and take me to them." For the first time it blinked, looking momentarily confused, then at Rebecca. "Yes, they're fine, but I can't and won't take you to them. They're following their voices, as you should be doing. Take a look around. Everyone is following their own calling, and you should do the same. If you do, then it might just be that you see them again. Now have a good day," the creature said in a way that didn't sound like it meant it in the slightest, and disappeared. Rebecca screamed and turned to Mike. "This is your fault." Mike didn't say anything. He only turned his gaze down to the floor, feeling a growing lump of guilt and sadness grow in his throat. "Come on," Rebecca said. "Might as well start looking." The first store they passed was not a store at all, but a hotel. The weird thing about it was that it was where the exit should have been, considering it was where they had entered. But instead of the exit, there stood a large red carpeted entryway leading to a shined wooden desk where yet another blue creature, this one wearing an old-style hotel uniform in bright red colors with the tiny ram horns poking out of either side of its red hat, was waiting on the other side. This one, unlike the last, was waving at them enthusiastically, trying to grab their attention. Mike turned his attention the other way, however, where he saw a large clothing store that seemed virtually empty. He had figured in a society that held no ugly people, there wouldn't be much need for a clothing store, but he was glad that it was there all the same. He tapped Rebecca on the shoulder, who turned her furious gaze on him. "What?" Mike timidly pointing to the clothing store. "Can I at least get something decent to wear?" Rebecca laughed. "Why, you never cared about what you wore before." Well, I feel like I'm wearing a dress commando style, and it's starting to make me feel, uncomfortable. Rebecca stopped laughing, taking in his appearance really for the first time. She started to turn red, but Mike noticed that this time it wasn't in anger. Right, of course. We should get you some new clothes. She stuttered, sounding much like Mike had felt earlier when he first noticed that the extremely pretty girl in front of him was his wife. They turned towards the clothing outlet, and Mike saw the blue hotel clerk give a disappointed sigh and turn around to start counting the keys on the wall behind it. There was only one other store between them and the clothing outlet, and Mike could only find one way to describe it: weird. A sign in front of the place said, "Are you tired of eating your food the same old way? Why not take an adventure while you hunt your own food?" Inside were giant mushrooms as tall as large trees with glowing red tops, surrounded by wooded forestry and deep dark earth trails leading in and through the mushrooms and trees. Mike shivered as he saw a horse-sized squirrel run past the main trail inside the store. Rebecca took no notice or pretended not to see it. Mike wasn't sure which. The clothing store turned out, much to Mike's disappointment, was just as weird of a place as the mushroom shop. Outlining the windows of the store were indeed different styles of clothing for both women and men, but the entryway was more like a walkway celebrities walked down when they appeared for the Oscars. Inside, the floor was made of white marble, and a long spotless red rug was laid from the entryway all the way down to yet another set of glass doors. Then on either side of the carpet were golden poles with foam red barriers, keeping out an actual paparazzi. As they entered, Mike heard his and Rebecca's name called over some invisible speaker. Now coming down the red rug of ultimate fame, we have the amazingly new addition of Michael Howard Rodriguez. So much more appealing than the original fat and slow version, wouldn't you say, folks? Now it appears he's starting a new fashion trend, old t-shirts that old fat guys used to wear. This was met with an uproar of laughing and cheers by the nameless faces now buzzing around on the other side of the barriers, with an endless amount of flashing coming from the cameras they held. Somewhere in the back of Mike's head, he couldn't help but wonder if this was real paparazzi scene that he and Rebecca were reliving, or if this was literally made up by the mountain. "Mike, over here," he heard from somewhere in the crowd that he promptly ignored. This was like something out of a nightmare. "By Michael's side," the announcer continued, "we have the most beautiful, stunningly attractive Rebecca Julia Fritz Rodriguez. Is there not anyone better, folks?" Mike heard Rebecca give a small shout of glee as he turned to look at her. She was smiling, waving back to the crowd with small but bright twinkles in her eyes. She even started to blow kisses at the crowd as they walked towards the second entryway. Of course, Mike knew that Rebecca had always envied the movie stars and their paparazzi, but now that he was living it, he found he wished it was a dream that had remained a fantasy. At last they reached the doors, which two muscle men dressed in tuxedos and sunglasses opened for them. They looked real enough, right down to the slight nod one of them gave him as he walked past, but Mike had a sneaking suspicion they were about as real as the rest of the paparazzi scene. Inside the actual store there stood yet another one of the blue people of undetermined sex. It was standing on a slightly raised platform made of shined oak wood and was smiling thoughtfully. This one was dressed in a large, baggy, bright yellow sweatshirt, tight black yoga pants, a small black beret with a red feather attached, and a small paintbrush held behind one ear. For once, the blue creature did not sport an animal feature, at least not one that could easily be seen. "Hello," it said in a soft voice as if it was shy. "Hi," Rebecca said. "I suppose you would like to change your look? Perhaps you would like clothing or a new hairstyle. Just say the word and I'm your guy," it attempted to say in an upbeat voice that still came across as shy and timid. "Clothes, please," Mike said, just starting to realize that he crossed a whole paparazzi field in nothing but a t-shirt. "Of course, sir. I have a selection of the finest fabrics, or if you want," the blue creature snapped its fingers, and behind it a door opened, revealing an expansive clothing selection that would have put any clothing store to shame. "You can select from my pre-made items if you don't already have something in mind." "I'll take a look around, thanks," Mike said. "And you, miss?" "I guess I'll follow him." "Okay, there'll be plenty there for you as well. Or," it said with a bright smile. It turned around and Mike noticed that it had a tail, a tiger's tail. It turned back around holding a long red silk dress that had sparkling fire red jewels attached at the ends. Rebecca's eyes sparkled. Can I have this? Of course, the artist said. Rebecca flung her dirty clothes off at once, and much to Mike's surprise, her slick body was not the same one that he remembered. It wasn't even the same one he had remembered when they were young. Her body was completely new, cleansed of all imperfections. Her breasts were not small or overly huge and firm. Her buttocks was round, free of any wrinkles. Her stomach was flat and toned, curving in perfect harmony with her body. Mike looked down at himself. Had he been similarly changed? Was he now a prince amongst men? He imagined himself going back to the office after all of this was over. They will apologize, he thought. Mike, they will say. How dare we not invite you to the office Christmas party? That was entirely uncalled for. Please remember us when you make it big. And I will smile and say, go F yourselves. Howard! Rebecca shouted, pulling Mike out of his daydream. Listen when I call you, boy. How do I look? Rebecca said, twirling around in the red dress. She looked like a fire angel. Mike wasn't sure how the blue creature managed to not only get Rebecca dressed, but also add red highlights to Rebecca's hair and makeup. He hadn't been daydreaming that long. The dress itself made Rebecca look like a living, sexy flame. Her back was completely exposed, showing the perfect smoothness of her skin, which seemed to glow red hot. Now, Rebecca said, let's get you out of this shirt. The moment Mike's shirt was off, he felt Rebecca's eyes become glued to him. He watched her. Her eyes were wide as they ran over his entire body. At long last, Mike looked down to examine himself. It was as his daydream suggested. He was picture perfect. Hairless, smooth skin, six-pack abs perfectly toned, muscular legs, buff arms, all with a tanned skin tone. By all means, balk and stare at each other, the artist said, showing backbone all of a sudden. I'm not standing here at all. If Mike had to guess, he would have thought he detected jealousy in its voice. Right, of course, Rebecca said, turning back around, her face now as red as her dress. I went ahead and picked out something for you to try as well, sir, it said, holding up a silver dress suit and a diamond-embroidered white tie. Rebecca's eyes started shining again, and she said, You are truly a genius. The blue creature smiled and took a small bow. Your praise and appreciation is all that I require, madam. In less than a moment, Mike found himself dressed in a silver suit, hair shined and shoes waxed as if he was going to prom. He turned towards the mirror that the blue creature pulled out from a storage closet that appeared out of nowhere, and for the first time, he saw his new face. His hair was thick, wavy, and coal black. The fat that he had grown so accustomed to was gone, leaving a clearly defined, sharp chin, and his eyes were now a red oak brown. It was still his face. He could see small things that he recognized, but at the same time, it was completely new. Okay, said the blue creature. Are you admiring my clothes or yourself? Mike glanced up at it, annoyed. You tend to get jealous when your work isn't the thing being admired, don't you? I have a right to be jealous. I stand here all day, making the things the few of you who can't stand a day in the nude, and I have never charged a dime. All I ask for is some appreciation. Okay, fine. I'm grateful. I feel 100% satisfied. You're the frickin' bee's knees of the frickin' fashion world, you tiger butt. You know what? It said. It gave him a nasty look, and then to Rebecca, come back any time, my dear, but without him. He's banned for eternity. It turned back around and snapped its fingers, disappearing along with the closet and the store. Mike and Rebecca were the only things left besides the exit. After a while, Rebecca said with a semi-smile, Well, at least she didn't take away your cute silver suit. You like this ugly thing? Rebecca frowned, but only said, Well, we got clothes. Let's go find our kids. They're not ours, Rebecca. How can she be so attached it hasn't even been a full day yet? Rebecca stiffened. We owe them, Mike. Yes, but this place is huge, possibly even infinite. You want to look forever? If that's what it takes. Yeah, well, I have better things to do. Like what? Trying to swim up the waterfall like a fool? Lest you forget, that's what got us in this mess to begin with. Is it, though? They're the ones that wandered away. You're probably just a bad mother, and I know I'm a worse father. Perhaps it was for the best that our baby... that our baby. Mike broke down in sobs and Rebecca joined him. Is that how you honestly feel? Rebecca said between sobs. Yes, Mike gasped. Okay then, Rebecca said, inhaling deeply. I will see her around then. Rebecca took one last look at Mike, and then she walked out, back into the paparazzi field. Mike wasn't sure how long he stayed in that empty room, feeling his sorrow hit him like a freight train. Rebecca was gone. Truly, for the first time in 2 decades, he was alone. He could feel it crushing down on him like a kid and an ant. Then at last, Mike pushed himself forward, making his way through the paparazzi and back out into the foyer of the mall. He felt sick and just wanted to go home, so he made his way past the mammoth and stopped at the information booth. He hesitated for a moment, then pressed the bell. Hello, came the muffled reply from the appearing desk clerk with the rabbit ears. How can I help you on this glorious day? It said dully. How do I get out of here? Mike demanded to know, feeling tears start to sting his eyes again. Mike wasn't sure why, but the creature gave him a sympathetic smile. Usually I do the crying around here, bub. Can I ask why? Mike said, automatically shocked that he asked it. Well, because one day I made a choice and now I'm trapped here. I thought you people were a part of the mountain. We are now, it said sadly. But anyways, you had asked me a question and the answer is 4. 4? Mike said, confused. That's right, 4. It said, holding up 4 fingers in Mike's face as if that would clear up everything. Think about it. You want to open up the door that leads to the second tower in freedom, don't you not? Yes, Mike said. Then what do you need to open a door? A doorknob, Mike said excitedly. Well, you don't exactly need a doorknob, it said, shaking its head. You do need hinges, though. Hinges? Yep, 4 of them. They're hidden throughout the tower, kind of like a hide and seek, I would guess. Anyways, when you find one, all you gotta do is give it a tap. Mike groaned. Why do I think this is going to be hard? Let me guess, you're not going to tell me where they are you? Nope, that would be against the rules. Of course it would. You'll know 'em when you see 'em, it said, smiling, and with that it snapped its fingers and said, Good luck, before disappearing. Mike nodded his head, turning to face the rest of the mall, still feeling the crushing weight of Rebecca's departure. He could do this without her, he told himself, and with that, he took a step forward.